Yes, it's been an extraordinary development, hasn't it? The mainstream media and the big tech giants covered up the Biden scandal. Now, for those at home who aren't aware of it, it was Hunter Biden, Joe Biden's son, left a laptop behind with tons of incriminating evidence about the cash for access scandal involving his own father, some personal peccadillos as well. But the mainstream media said this was not true. It was a Russian collusion and Russian hoax. But now they seem to want to challenge and pick this up and say, well, yes, it's been investigated for the last 2 years and we're going to report on it. So, James, do you think their agenda all the time was to install a patsy in Joe Biden, someone who was probably maybe acceptable to the electorate, but behind him to have the radical left ready to seize power?
Yeah, I think that's exactly right, Cory. I mean, Joe Biden is somebody who, for all of his faults, he comes across as more or less, a normal guy. He's got that sort of avuncular uncle sort of thing, a little bit goofy, says some weird stuff, maybe not entirely all there all the time. But he seemed to, I think, a lot of Americans who wanted simply a return to something that felt normal, like a, like a normal sort of president, if a bit of a doddering one. The idea then, was you put him in there because none of the other candidates that the Democrats ran in the nomination, I mean, Bernie Sanders, come on, any of these other people could have potentially, fulfilled that role of beating Trump, seeming like that normal, safe pair of hands. But you pair him with somebody like Kamala Harris, who is, backed by the radical progressive left in the media and elsewhere. And suddenly it's like, OK, you get sort of a Trojan horse thing going on. You're absolutely right, Cory. Twitter, everybody else did their absolute best to squelch that Hunter Biden laptop story when it came out, when the New York Post broke that story a couple of weeks before the election. They said, no, it's fake news, it's Russian, it's disinformation, it's an attempt to interfere in the election. We won't report on that. Then suddenly, now that it looks like Biden is going to get in and is going to take the oath of office next month, well, suddenly it's like, I think we can start to talk about this now because, maybe at some point Joe could get implicated with this. He might want to spend more time with his family to help Hunter with his personal demons. Who knows where this is going to go next year?
Yeah, it was quite an extraordinary response from Biden today. I'm not sure if you saw the speech after the Electoral College formally voted, in which he called upon the country to heal, but also went on the attack against Donald Trump and saying how divisive he had been and undermined democracy. Now, what I found extraordinarily galling about this was that the Democrats, and he is the Democratic Party, he told us that, the Democrats manufactured hoax after hoax about Donald Trump. They spied on his campaign. They tried to impeach him on information that they knew was blatantly false. They divided America with Black Lives Matters and Antifa. And now they're saying it's all Donald Trump's fault. It just beggars belief that this is carried as a credible narrative by credible media in the States.
And, what else is going on, Cory, is the same sort of thing that we saw at Joe Biden's convention speech. Do you remember that? Do you remember when he got up and he, did the exact same verbal trick? He said, we're going to unite America. America's, going to come together. And by the way, half of America are terrible, evil forces of darkness. And if you're part of them, we don't want anything to do with you. This is the trick that they pull. They say it's forces of light and forces of darkness. They're on the forces of light. And anybody opposes them, you better get out of the way because you represent the forces of darkness. You're evil. And that's what he's saying to everybody who supported Trump, everybody who thought, the Republicans should get in. But I'll tell you what, there's 70 million Americans out there who cast their vote for Donald Trump who are not going to go away quietly on this.
Yes, it's going to be a challenge to unite the American nation and to promote it back to its former land of glory because the left of the political divide, the Democrats and their more radical leftists, do seem to want to have a totalitarian nature. If you don't fully comply and sign up to their agenda, well, then you're an enemy and they try and shut you down and close it off. But, we've seen this with the tech giants as well. They have protected Biden, they've protected the Democratic Party, and now they're installing staffers in the proposed Biden administration. Should we be worried about that?
Well, absolutely. But, you hit on something right there. These people, the radical woke left are really revolutionary at their core. And the fundamental rule for all of these people is no enemies to my left. All of my enemies are to my right. So the thing is, you can never be radical enough to satisfy them, so they will continue to tilt further and further and further to the left. And when you start to see Twitter execs and other people like that going into the transition team and taking up spots in the future White House under a Biden administration, well, yeah, we should be really concerned, because that is where you're going to get this kind of, corporatist media that's going to be more like a Pravda or an Izvestia than it is, a newspaper like the Washington Post, which claims that democracy dies in darkness, but we know has a far different agenda.